Today, Focus Gaming News welcomes Brendan Bussmann, Partner and Director of Government Affairs at Global Marketing Advisors. Brendan, hello, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here today.
How are things there? I believe you're in Las Vegas?
I am in Las Vegas. It's a nice sunny day. Things are looking up here, and we're starting our road back.
Absolutely. We hear that venues are looking forward to getting back to full capacity, hopefully before too long.
Yes, we're heading into sort of what I hope is the home stretch, and being able to do the recovery. We started our recovery back in June of last year when the casinos were first allowed to reopen. And hopefully by June 1st of this year, we will be back at 100% capacity, or at least ability to host 100% capacity along the way. There's challenges that we still have to overcome to get there. And once we are there in our full return and recovery, but it's good to see, some, not just the locals market, but obviously the strip market returning. We saw some great numbers out of March when it came to gaming revenue. But the path forward is looking good, and I know the industry is excited to get back on their feet, as well as with the additional health and safety measures they put into place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was going to ask, how are the casinos feeling, and how confident are they about starting to attract people back from outside of the state?
I think it's good, and I think people are cautiously optimistic. Obviously, we know that bumps, as we've seen in other parts of the world, can occur still and have setbacks. But I think based off the March gaming revenue numbers, it shows the resiliency of Vegas and people's desire to come back, enjoy fun and get back out. That in some cases they've been locked down for a year, and the path forward is very good. People are optimistic, especially if you look at the meeting and convention business that we have been without here for now 14 plus months. We're all looking forward to hosting World of Concrete here in June, which I know everybody says it's a concrete show. What the heck is that all about? And I'll tell you, it's one of the best shows we have that comes to the destination. It's very cool. And there's a lot of technology and everything else associated with it. But, the announcement also of CES returning in January and other things, the third and fourth quarter and heading into 22 looks very strong to get that, business customer back here. And then, hopefully down the road here, we'll start being able to accept international guests as well.
Brilliant. Is there anything you think that your casino operators can be doing to kind of help ensure the smoothest, strongest possible recovery?
I think they've already done a lot, and they'll continue to do that. And obviously, first and foremost is putting together the health and safety protocols that, in some cases, like Wynn Resorts kicked that off at the end of March last year, saying, here's our path forward and here's what we're going to do. And, as you see the lessening of some of these restrictions, there's going to be some things that remain in place. Amount of times cleaning, the temperature checks, those types of things, I think are very much a permanent thing. Obviously the mask mandate here is probably going to be here for a while. But, I think operators are trying to make sure that guests, when they do come back, have the best experience they can possible. And obviously, as we continue to relax some of those things, we can bring back shows and meetings and conventions and other entertainment things. So you can have that full Vegas experience of, whether you're here for business or pleasure, you can game, you can dine, you can entertain, you can shop, you can do it all. And that's what Vegas is about.
Excellent. Well, heading across the Pacific then, Japan's IR process is finally starting to move forward. How attractive do you think the Japanese market is going to look for investors? Do you think the government's getting it right?
I still hold true that I think Japan is one of the last strong markets that can exist. Partially that stems from it's a virtually untapped market in Asia. While Japanese have other, amenities in the area, Korea being the closest out of all of those, it's really an untapped gaming market that has huge potential if done correctly. And it's also one of those where the regulatory structure is safe enough to be able to do business, that operators aren't walking into situations where, they may risk a license somewhere else or it not be as stable of an environment. So I think it's very strong. As far as the prospects go, yes, the process is moving. Unfortunately, Japan continues to have setbacks as it relates to the pandemic, and currently in a shutdown phase. But hopefully they're able to host the Olympics this summer in Tokyo, and do some of those other things that will help move, not just the destinations process forward, but also the IR process. And hopefully we don't see a setback in there. But you've got 4 cities right now that are actively competing for those 3 licenses. There may or may not be 1 or 2 that still come up that, roughly a year from now, we'll have that process in place of when applications are due at central government. But, there's some strong proposals out there to be able to move this forward. The challenge remains of trying to do development in the middle of a pandemic, when, you necessarily can't always get to the site, you can't meet with the people you need to, and all the challenges that we've all experienced with travel over the last year plus.
Do you think there are any other things that operators need to be aware of, or need to bear in mind when they're considering entering into Japan?
Well, I think the biggest thing, and we've seen, a little bit more of this over the last month. I think one of the big concerns, even if you look past when this initially passed back in December of 16, when the IR Promotion Act passed, and when the IR Implementation Act passed then in 2018, is what is the true regulatory structure and how is that going to work? We saw a glimpse of that, and currently under comment period, when those came out from the Casino Regulatory Commission back at the beginning of April. And I think people are seeing, hopefully, there's some things in there that I think they still need to amend to make it a better market in doing some of those things. But, one thing that continually is apparent is, tax rate is not necessarily going to change over everything. It's going to be set where it's at, but how you calculate GGR, where promotions may or may not come into play, those types of things are all important. How you count casino space, which is obviously very important. We first saw that in Singapore with the 15,000 square meter limit. How are you counting that 3% threshold, and what is it based off of, not only in the numerator, but the denominator, and being able to figure out those things. But the other thing with Japan, obviously there's a deep concern for responsible gaming measures. And currently, with the existing gaming product, not just with, racing, but also what you see with pachinko and patchy slot, is those provisions really aren't in place. And so any operator going into that market is basically going to have to, from the ground up, create that structure in partnership with not just the local prefectures, but the national government and the CRC, to develop that infrastructure for that small percentage of people that do have a problem, make sure those resources are available accordingly.
Okay, and well, just over in the Philippines, then, sticking in the Asia Pacific region, it's been a period of some changes and a bit of upheaval because of the COVID-19 pandemic, of course. The pandemic, together with some wrangling over tax, has had quite an impact on the offshore casinos operating in the Philippines. What do you think about the future of the pogo phenomenon on the islands? And do you think it will continue on the same scale as before?
I think, as you've seen, the pandemic, yes, it's hurt not only the online, but also the land-based, obviously, in the Philippines across the board when it comes to revenue. And I think we've continually seen that as PAGCOR's released their revenue reports. One of the challenges you had with POGOs, they rose so quickly, so fast, that the regulatory structure basically had to catch up with them. And the pandemic actually provided the regulators sort of that opportunity to say, hey, time out, guys, let's figure out a few of these things. One of the things that I know that just sort of has been continually resolved over the last year to 18 months is the anti-money laundering law. At one point there were 3 different versions of it, depending on where you set up shop, on what you had to follow. So streamlining that process. I think you'll see, once things completely move forward post-pandemic, you're probably going to see fewer operators in the market, but more robust and legitimate operators that want to do business in the cleanest way possible. They've had challenges across the way with employment, with tax paying, a whole host of things. And, the pandemic's offered PAG4 the ability to sort of play catch up and say, hey guys, let's all stay in the lane and you can do it right as long as you stay in the lane. But, I remember being over there and I look forward to going back to Manila and elsewhere in the Philippines that, so-and-so didn't pay their tax bill and their doors were locked and they'd lock them out for, 10,000 employees that couldn't get into their building because of that. And obviously that's nothing you ever want to see in the gaming industry, period. But you want to make sure those checks and balances are. It can be a very robust market. And I think if done right, and I think as we're seeing across the way, online is definitely a way that adds additional revenue. And if done right, it'll only supplement further gaming revenue across the board.
PAGCOR has mentioned that they think that some of the polos may set up shop elsewhere in the region. Do you think there is a room for another hub to emerge for operators targeting China from outside of the country?
I think, if you look at the online space and specifically as it relates to Asia, there are going to be other people that try to set up shop in maybe less regulated markets because they want to be able to try to get away with just a little bit more there. The concern I would raise, and this goes to, I think you saw this roughly a year and a half, 2 years ago in Cambodia. And when China came down and said, hey, we don't want you doing online gaming at all. And they shut everything down and everybody left those facilities and you saw a mass exodus because they put that down. And I think one of the concerns, and this is for Asia and a little bit even beyond when you look at this, we talk about Japan and other things is, when China eventually does come out with that blacklist, who all does it include and what parameters off of that? And any operator that I think is looking to get around an unregulated market or figure out a way is probably going to feel that hammer coming down from Beijing a little bit more. And it won't be as friendly of a conversation because the warning shot's out there. It's just a matter of how you do it. But, definitely that emerging blacklist is a lot of concern, not just for online, but also for land-based and what that may or may not do.
And you also mentioned land-based casinos in the Philippines, obviously impacted as well by the pandemic. And there's been some movement towards at least some initial online licenses for land-based casinos in the Philippines from PAGCOR. Do you think there's really a chance that might develop? We might see a kind of licensed online gambling within the Philippines?
I think yet to be determined on how that's all going to work out regulatorily. But, as we've seen here in the States, and I think it's a model, you can use in other jurisdictions, whether it's Asia, Europe, or anywhere else, is online revenue can definitely supplement, not supplant land-based revenue if done properly. And it's, sometimes reaching that player that doesn't want to walk into a brick and mortar casino or doesn't want to go that far. Obviously the pandemic has changed a lot of our current habits over how we do stuff. Here in Vegas, when you still had in-person registration for mobile sports betting, land-based porticachaires of facilities turned into basically bank tellers because there was no way to funnel the money into your account other than do a drive-through. And that's where, there's enough protections now online with the use of technology to be able to track and trace and do all those things that I think, as new jurisdictions emerge or those jurisdictions that have land-based operations today, I think operators are figuring out online licenses, maybe a part of that effort. And obviously it's a longer conversation on how to do that, but I think you're going to see some symbiotic relationships going forward between land and online.
Okay, yeah, still a lot to be seen what happens there. Well, thank you, Brendan, for your time, for joining us today. Is there anything you'd like to add yourself, about anything you're looking forward to personally as we start to emerge from the pandemic?
I would say the two things I'm probably looking forward to most as we emerge from the pandemic is one, I look forward to hosting as many people back in Vegas when you can get back here. Obviously, for those domestically here within the States, come on over as quick as you can. For those internationally, I know it's going to take a lot longer, but hopefully by G2E and some other things, we'll be able to see some people over here, from outside our borders. But the other thing I'm looking forward to is getting outside of the United States. I'm fully vaccinated. I look forward to being able to travel internationally, getting back to Japan, getting back to Manila, and anywhere else in Asia and Europe. And it's definitely one that I can't wait to get back out in the field and return to as normal as we can.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Brendan. We'll look forward to seeing you hopefully before too long then.
Absolutely. Look forward to seeing you guys in person soon.
Thanks, Brendan.
Thank you.